I tweeted to Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know. I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism.
But the second you're like, well, actually, it's the Jews. First of all, it's against my Christian faith. Like, I just don't believe that, and I never will, period. And second, then it becomes a way to discredit. That's when I was like, this guy's a Fed.
Tucker Carlson just broke the internet. Nick Fuentes finally sat down across from him, and what came out wasn't just a conversation. It was a reveal of how deep the cultural war really goes. And now Ben Shapiro, he's melting down. Welcome to the Matrix Breakdown. Let's plug in.
Well, as you just saw from that video, Tucker Carlson had a sit-down interview with Nick Fuentes, who's obviously a very controversial figure. And I was happy to see that they had a back and forth about their differences on how they discuss Israel and what's being carried out in Gaza. I am certainly more in agreement with Tucker Carlson. I do not blame the Jews, but I do blame a certain ideology and a certain government that has carried out the atrocities that we've seen in the Middle East, not just during this genocide in Gaza, but over the last several decades. That you have Nick Fuentes, and he thinks that there's an organized Jewry that is essentially leading to the situation that we're seeing right now on the ground in Gaza. Again, I agree more with Tucker Carlson. I'm just recounting that part of the discussion in case you missed our coverage of it, because we talked about that yesterday. But there were other parts of their conversation that I thought were worthy of delving into. I wanted to share with you, including this really interesting experience that Nick Fuentes allegedly had with the Daily Wire and Ben Shapiro. So this is all taking place when Nick Fuentes is still in high school. He's like around 18 years old. He's a curious person. He's a self-identified libertarian. He debates someone, and apparently that debate he performed really well in. And then he gets approached by someone who I'm actually familiar with. Her name is Cassie Dillon, who works over at the Daily Wire. She was impressed, and then there was like this effort to essentially recruit Nick Fuentes. Now, there's more to the story, and I wanna let Fuentes set it up for you, so let's take a look.
Barack Obama, in the lame duck period, so the Democrats lost the election, he's on his way out. There's a resolution of the Security Council condemning the settlements in the West Bank in Israel. And typically, the US delegation will veto those resolutions condemning Israel. Well, Obama's on his way out, he's got nothing to lose. So the US delegation abstains from the resolution and it passes. And Fox News and all the pro-Israel conservatives are calling him an anti-Semite. They're saying he hates Jews, he's an anti-Semite, he hates Israel. I said, how is it anti-Semitic to just be consistent on our US foreign policy? I tweeted about it. I tweeted to Ben Shapiro. I said, I've never seen anything on the Daily Wire that's actually critical of Israel. And he quote tweets me. And at this time, I have 1,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know, I probably got 100 likes on this tweet. It wasn't a viral tweet. He quote tweets me and says, to accuse a Jew of dual loyalty is the surest sign of anti-Semitism.
How is that? First of all, dual loyalty exists. I said it exists. There are Americans in this country right now, self-identified American Jews, who seem to be far more concerned with the well-being of a foreign country, and that foreign country is Israel, as opposed to the well-being of this country. Ben Shapiro is a fiscal conservative who's very concerned about our entitlement programs like Social Security, programs that we pay into as Americans, so we can maybe one day retire and not be destitute. He thinks that we spend too much money on that program and healthcare and all that. But when it comes to bribing Egypt to play nice with Israel, money well spent. $4 billion a year to Israel, money well spent.
What a joke.
$30 billion since October 7th to help Israel commit its atrocities in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, money well spent. Our tax dollars working for us, the American people, what a waste. We're in debt, we're in debt. I'm not gonna believe a single politician or pundit in this country, left or right, when they say they are concerned about our debt as they just funnel more and more of our resources to a foreign country. Dual loyalty exists, and that's not anti-Semitism. It's a fact and it's reality.
Anna Kasparian is exactly right. This isn't about Nick Fuentes. This isn't about Tucker Carlson. And honestly, it's not even about Ben Shapiro. This is about who controls the conversation and what happens when someone refuses to play by the rules. Because look around. You can question the CIA. You can question Ukraine funding. You can question COVID policy. You can question the Epstein files. But the second someone questions US policy towards Israel, it's career suicide. Why? Because in politics, silence is obedience. And Nick, for better or worse, refused silence.
Never thought I would see the day where I would, I guess, defend Nick Fuentes over the ridiculous smears of Ben Shapiro. You know, Israel effed up big time by carrying out what they've been carrying out over the last 2 years. Because for the first time in my lifetime, I'm seeing Americans ask questions and actually effectively push back against these talking points that had silenced people previously. But there is evidence of dual loyalty, and there's nothing anti-Semitic to call it out. Now let's watch Fuentes explain how he actually used to have a very good relationship with the folks over at the Daily Wire, and then he started asking what they referred to as the wrong questions.
The wrong questions.
I was friends with a lot of the Daily Wire writers, not just Cassie Dillon, but many of them were Jewish. And I would ask them point blank, I would say, so why do we give Israel all this money? $3.8 billion per year? What is that for? And they would say, well, you know, there's a really good answer for that, but you're asking it in the wrong way. You're asking it in an anti-Semitic way. I'd say I'm asking for the proof. You know, what's the argument there? And so first it was the sort of, hey man, could you kind of tone it down? Maybe just don't bring that up so much. But I was persistent because at this time I was genuinely inquisitive. I wanted to know, is there an actual reason? And I was actually expecting that there was a really good reason for all of it. And the more that I read, the more that I dug into the subject, the more I found out there's a lot of these neocon Jewish types behind the Iraq war. There's the foreign aid complex, which is really unique. There's AIPAC, which is this intense foreign lobby where it's bipartisan. It seems to be the only thing that the parties can agree on. And so it just made me burn more with curiosity. So I just kept asking them. And eventually they said, you know what? We're not going to talk to you anymore.
Oh, it's dangerous. It's dangerous to ask those questions. Okay, this is a side note, and I know it's going to take away from the commentary a little bit, but you got the sniffles, bro. You got to do something about the sniffles. Okay, it was really distracting, but putting that aside, no, he was asking the right questions. In fact, I wish more Americans asked those questions. And the way that they tried to bury him for asking those questions is super sus. Why? What's wrong with asking, why is it that we fund Israel to the tune of $4 billion every year? And then of course, there's always like supplemental funding that pops up out of nowhere. Like the random $1 billion in extra funding that AOC allegedly didn't want to vote in favor of. Then she voted present and then cried on the House floor and embarrassed progressives in this country with how pathetic she is. Sorry, I know that's a harsh thing to say. I'm supposed to be very rah-rah about the progressives in Congress, except when push comes to shove, they do a lot of unprogressive things, like provide Israel with an additional $1 billion in funding when we're already giving them $4 billion a year.
Whether you agree with Fuentes or think he's toxic, 300,000 people watching his live stream is not an accident. People aren't supporting him because they like every word he says. They're supporting him because they hate being told what they're allowed to think. There is a growing movement, left, right, independent, that's sick of speech being unofficially regulated by media class gatekeepers. You don't have to like Nick Fuentes, You don't have to agree with him. But pretending he doesn't exist, pretending he doesn't reflect a huge shift in public sentiment, that's delusion. And that's why this interview was a turning point.
In military aid. He didn't ask the wrong questions. The problem is he asked the right questions in the wrong environment. In an environment where the dual loyalty certainly does exist. And no one's gonna stop me from saying that, because it's the truth. It's the truth. Let's pivot to a more amusing part of the discussion, because Tucker Carlson and Nick Fuentes had a bit of a tiff earlier this year. They both accused each other of being feds. It was hilarious. And look, Tucker Carlson also said that, Nick Fuentes is like a gay kid living in his parents' basement, whatever. And so that really upset Nick Fuentes. He did a whole broadcast about it. It blew up and everyone was like waiting for this moment where they would, hash it out. And they did. So Carlson repeatedly urged Fuentes to let go of his grudges against his perceived enemies. And that led to the two of them basically focusing on their recent feud. So let's watch the clip and then we'll explain the backstory a little more.
Look, Tucker, that's why I'm sitting here,
Right.
I mean, because we had a contentious dialogue.
Well, I
for
thought
a
you
long
were
time.
a Fed. I
I thought you were a Fed.
I was a Fed.
Yeah.
I'm not a Fed. But whatever, I don't care what people
Yeah,
think.
we showed each other a badge as we know well.
No, but I thought you were a Fed because I was like, why not? It's not cucking to say you're not talking about all Jews when you oppose a foreign policy position. It's not. There's nothing liberal about that. It's just true. That's the Christian position, okay? And two, why are you attacking like the best people and not the worst people?
Well, yeah, I mean, again, he disavowed me for my views on Israel and said I talk too much about white people and Christianity. And to me,
Right.
that's like a sincere ideological disagreement.
I get it.
Okay, so the guy that they're talking about is Joe Kent. That's who they were feuding about. So he's a Republican who ran for the House in Washington. In Washington's 2022 and 2024 elections. He did lose both times. And according to Fuentes, many years ago, Fuentes privately gave Kent the support of both himself and his organization's political resources on the condition that Kent would never publicly disavow Fuentes, which I think is a ridiculous ask. You never know what the future holds. What if Fuentes does something terrible? I think Kent should be allowed to disavow him, right? But later, Kent did just that after Marjorie Greene attended Fuentes' conference back in 2022. Okay, look, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, here's what I do care about. The reason why Tucker thought that Nick Fuentes was a Fed is because when you have critics of Israel specifically blaming the Jews and spewing anti-Semitic rhetoric, those of us who don't think it's the Jews and instead specifically blame a government and those who adhere to a certain ideology, we get lumped in with the likes of Nick Fuentes or whoever says disgusting anti-Semitic things about Jews, and that discredits us. And so many think that figures like that are feds meant to intentionally discredit those who have legitimate criticism about Israel. So that's why Tucker Carlson thought he was a Fed. Now, is he a Fed? No, I don't think he's a Fed. I think he's I think he got his start very young. I think he's on the record saying a lot of terrible things. I think he's trying to be or was trying to be some sort of edgelord. And in a lot of ways that destroyed his reputation. When in reality, if he didn't feed into that gross, hateful rhetoric, and not just about Jews, about women, about all sorts of people, he's actually not a dumb guy. He makes cogent arguments. He seems to be well read. And he would be far more influential if he didn't cave into or give into that rhetoric.
Yeah, honestly, this isn't about supporting Israel or opposing Israel. It's about the fact that for the first time in decades, Americans are openly questioning where their tax dollars go and why their politicians prioritize foreign interests over their own citizens. Whether it's $4 billion a year to Israel, $30 billion after October 7th, or billions more hidden in supplemental packages, people aren't blind anymore. They're asking, Why can't we afford healthcare, but we can afford endless foreign military aid? Why are we told to cut Social Security, but not foreign spending? Why does political loyalty seem tied to a different country? These are uncomfortable questions, but uncomfortable truth is still truth. So now, the only question left is, did Tucker Carlson normalize a dangerous figure, or is he exposing a system that's terrified of being questioned? Drop your take in the comments. I read every one. And if you want the truth without filters or media gatekeepers, subscribe, because we're breaking the matrix one conversation at a time.